Hello everyone, welcome back to Natural Language Processing course. In today's lecture, we will learn on Chapter 2, Introduction and a quick overview on Python programming. So this is the brief outline in our chapter here. The first part, we will talk about some facts on Python programming and how we can use some basic syntax. And lastly, we will learn on how to use module in Python. So Python, it is an interpreted programming language. It is not a compiled language compared to C language. So what does it mean, interpreted language here? If we are talking about interpreted language, it is not the same to the compiled language, because whenever you write some codes and in order to run the program, you will need the compiler or interpreter to translate the code to the machine language. So interpreted language, it will not stack your codes to be run. That means you still can run your codes as long as it will meet the error. So then it will stop at that place. But in the compiled language, unless your code has no error, so that it can run. And in Python, it has the dynamic variable type. That means we don't have to create any variable before we can use them. And when we want to make a Python program, the extension file is .py. As in C, we use .c or .cpp for C++, for example. And we don't have to type any semicolon for ending a statement. And also the curly brace here, it is not really necessary. However, we use tabs to embrace our block of codes. For example, when we use in a if block or loop block. And let's see, we will talk on the first program in Python. For example, you create a file, hello-world.py here. And then you can add some commands, some code written in Python. For example, print hello world. Then you can run these files by using the command line. Just simply open your CMD or your terminal if you are using Linux. And next, we can just simply type Python following by the file names. And here's the examples in Python programs. So it's really easy, right? As you can see from here, we can just simply type the command print without using any other commands, like we need to include something or we need to put some main methods. It is not necessary to put those information as we compare to C, C++ or Java. And in every programming language, normally we need to write some commands, right? So in Python, you can start writing command by putting the symbol. And next, we will see on how are the difference between C, C++, Java, and Python in order to run just simple programs. As you can see from here, in C language, you may need to include some library like stdio.h. And next, you have main function, so that you can use your printf command in order that you can display the message. And similarly in C++, we use cout command. And this we need to include some namespace standard. And looking in Java, as you can see from here, you need to write many codes, right? So to summarize, perhaps in here, you need 5 lines of code in order that you can run simple programs. But if we take a look on Python programming here, it's really simple, right? We just need only one simple command, so our message can be displayed correctly. And next we will talk about the variable in Python. So in Python, as we have mentioned in the earlier slide, it has the dynamic variables type. So that means we don't have to create any variable before we can use it. So in our program, we can just simply assign some numbers or some value to the variables. For example, in here, we have the value 10, and then we want to store it in a variable, say, counter. So this is representing as an integer dynamically in our program. We don't have to create it in advance. Like in C, you will need to say something like in counter, and then you can say counter equal to 10. And for other values, for example, in floating number, you can do it in the same way. And for strings, there are different ways of representing strings in Python. For example, you can store a value of a string using double quote symbol. And you can also use a single quote symbol to store string. Unlike in C or in Java or in C++, you will need to store only with double quotes. Normally, single quote is used for character array, but in Python it is flexible. And in addition to the single and double quote here, we have another strings. We have a triple symbol here. Like we can have the single quote triple, or we have double quote triple. So that these representing as the multiple line. So that means you have some information that you want to display it line by line, for example. So in Python, it's really easy, right? You can just put those information in the triple quotes here. So it will represent this information for you very fast. And for the way that we can assign some value to the variables, you can just put many variables at the same time. For example, in here, you can have 3 variables. And next, in the right hand side, you can have 3 values. So these values will be assigned respectively to your variables on the left. And also there is another assignment called multiple assignments, which you can assign one value to many variables at the same time. So it helps you to reuse the way on how you write variables a lot. And we have number here, we have string. And in addition to this, we have 2 similar variable types. We have list and tuple. So perhaps you already learned on list. List is used to store some set of information in the list, right? You can have many items. For example, you can also have an array and you store those information in the array. But just in the disadvantage of the array, it is fixed size. You cannot use many information as you like once you define the size of the array. But in list, it is dynamic. You can add information as much as you can. For example, in here, we have value in the list. We have A, B, C, D, and we have the number. So one feature in Python is that all information in the list, it does not to have the same data type. We can have many data types together, and then we can just put in the list. For example, in this case, we have string, we have integer, and we have float. They are all combined together into a list. And in addition to the list, we have tuple data structure here. It actually works similar to the list, but there is one rule. In tuples, once you store the information, you cannot modify them. That means you can just only store them. You cannot update or you cannot add more information, not at all, once you have already defined the tuple. And another special type is we call dictionary. Like you store information in the terms of key value pairs. For example, we can create a dictionary with this syntax. We have variable names equal to curly brace here. So this is the way like we create a dictionary. And next we can assign key and values into this dictionary. For example, dict1 equal to this is 1. Dict2, this is 2. So whatever you store in the dictionary, you need to provide a key. So when we want to retrieve those information back, we need to follow it by the key names. It works the same way. Or another term in here we call associative array. All right. So next we will take a look on Python operators, how we can operate operations, what are those operations that we can perform. For example, we have arithmetic operators. I think you already know this. You can have addition, you can have subtractions, multiplication, divisions, or we can have modulo signs, which try to find the remainder for you. And we have this one, it's something like special as well if we compare to the other language like C. So in here, it tries to find the exponent for you. For example, suppose you have A equal to 2, B equal to 3 here. And next, if you say D equal to A, exponent of 2, that means you can get 2 to the power of 2. So that means the result is 4. And we also have some other operators. For example, we have comparison operators in which you can compare two numbers, two values together. So we have equality, non-equality, greater than, less than, greater than or equals, less than or equals. So it just works the same way in how you write them in C or C++. And we also have assignment operators. We have equal, summation equal here. That means if you say B minus equal 2, that means you say B equal to B minus 2, right? I think you already learned this in the other programming languages. And this is also important, these three types of operators. Like we have identity operators, which allow you to check whether something is belong to something. Something is actually something, for example. Sorry, it's not belong to something. And we have another membership operators, which allow you to check whether something exists in something. For example, you have a list of number. Suppose you have a list of number here. Let's say 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you want to check whether value 2 is in this list. So you have list here. So you can just say, let's say 2 in L. So we use in operator here, right? So from this, it will return true for you because number 2 exists in this one. And we can also use logical operators like you already used before. In here we have NOT, OR, and AND. So for example, in C, you may use double AND, right, to represent AND. But in Python, it simply gives you the way how you read those informations. You simply use OR or AND. Okay, we have learned some basic information in Python. So next, we will take a look on a little bit more information, which is so important that we can use in programming language. So this one is, we will take a look on decision making first. So what is decision making? In programming, it allows us to write some codes in a more syntax way. For example, you want only some codes to be executed when some condition is happened. So how to make it in Python? So we have the command if, we have elif. If you have more than one, okay, you can continually provide elif. And finally, we have the else syntax. So in Python here, it's quite simple. You just need these symbols. We use colon. We don't need to provide like curly brace. For example, in Python or in C, you have to provide curly brace in order to embrace all your codes for a certain block. So in here, we don't need to do that. What we need to do is use this symbol, and every time we need to tab. We need to use tab in order to indent our codes to which block that we want it to belong to. For example, in here, what does this code do? Can you guess? After we take a look on these codes, we can see that at first we try to assign some numbers, right? And next we will check whether this number is in between some ranks. So the purpose of this one is trying to check whether this input number, it is belong to 2 digits, 3 digits, or 4 digits numbers. So as you can see here in this at line 4, we use a condition 99 less than num and less than 99. So that means here it will give you a AND operators. So another version of writing this syntax, you cannot use the word AND here, or simply use this one is okay. So from these codes, as we can see, we have the input number is 1122. So it is supposed to be 4 digits, right? So this line of code will be executed because the condition is turned to be true. All right, so I think you may have some familiars, but some syntax here. You probably already learned how to write decision making in C or C++. And next we come to take a look on the loop syntax. How does loop works? So for example, in here, as you already learned about while loops, so let's rewind a little bit on the while loop. So in while loop, how it works? We have condition. So in while loop, it will check for condition. If it is true, so what happens? Your code will be executed. Your code inside the loop is executed. And next, it will come back to check the condition again. But if the condition is false, let's say it's failed here. So all codes inside the loop will not executed, right? So in here, it will break out of the loop and it will stop the loop from running. So as you can see from here, we have while loops and we have condition. So we use these colon again, just similar way we write decision making. So what does this code do? We have the variable sum equal to 0 and then we initialize I variable equal to 10. So from these blocks, we are trying to find summation, right? So we start from I from 10. So each time the value of sum here, we start from 0 first. So each time it will sum 0 plus 10. So we get 10 and we display this one. And next, if we try to keep running this loop until I is negative, right? Because we keep decreasing this one. So as the result, we will obtain list of numbers. Each time we add to the sum variable. So as you can see here, we have some syntax adding some parameters to the print command. If you take a look from the previous example, in print, you have only one parameter, right? So from here, if you use only one parameter, that means you will use a default new line. For example, in print, every time you display some message, it will give a new line for you for the next command. But if you use AND here, okay, you're trying to change the default setting. Now you're using the empty space instead. And similarly, after we run this one, and we will get the results from these whiles. From this while loop, we get this information. We get 10, 19, so because each time we are trying to add some numbers. And next, we take a look on for loop. So in for loop, it just works the same way like in C or C++. So in Python, it have a command called rank. In rank, it will generate numbers from 0 to number less than itself. For example, we have 10. So it will give you a number from 0 to 9. So from here, you're trying to loop it, right? So we can use this operator in. So for I in rank here, we are trying to loop it from 0, 1, 2, 3, something, right? So as a result, we obtain this output. So probably you have learned this loop before, I think you may just need to familiar with the syntax. So be careful when you use with Python. Make sure that you have this colons operator and you have tab. So tab here will provide you that this code belong to this block. Okay. So next we will take a look on some more information on the Pythons. So in general, if you have familiar with learning programming language, the quickest way to try to learn new language, you can look on a similar syntax, simple syntax, and some of those syntax they are prepared in a document. We call it cheat sheet. So you can just simply type Python cheat sheet on Google. Then it will show you many syntax. It's summarized for you. For example, how to use variable, how to use operators, and some other operations. For example, in here, we create variable and we use this variable, and we have numbers operation. And in this number, okay, we can also convert this number into a string. Simply use str function. And to obtain the input from the user, we can use the input command. This is the input command. So in Python, by default, whatever you input, it will translate this to a string for you. So if the user input number 2, it will suppose this is a string consisting of number 2. But if you want to get a number instead, you need to convert it. So in here, you can use int function here. You need to enclose everything here into an int function so that you can obtain this input as a value. And next, you can calculate. You're trying to convert some inputs from degree, from Celsius. We have the input is Celsius, and we're trying to convert it to Fahrenheit using this formula. And finally, you can print these calculations to the screens. Just simply use the comma for separating your variables and your text information. And for string operations, you can use single or double quotes to represent your string. And you have multi-line representation of strings. You can also combine text, combine string together using concatenate operator we call plus here. So with string, it will concatenate two strings for you. But if you apply it with two numbers, it will sum those numbers for you. And it also have the string multiplications, so you can multiply string many times together as well. And I think this one is also useful. We try to use it most of the time. We can count number of characters that are appearing in a string using the len function. So similar to the conversions number to string, we can convert string to number using this syntax as well. I think from this, you may have some feeling on how to read more information. If you're trying to learn more language, you can simply take a look on cheat sheets of those language. It may help you to take a look on it, learn it faster. And here are some more information on the cheat sheet here. I think we will not take a look further detail here. Like give you the syntax on how to use decision makings. And this is how you can convert string to lowercase, uppercase, or you count some character in a string. So these are string operations. I think if you work on some project, you may need to use some operations, some functions that are working with the string. So in that case, you can take a look on list of available function as well. Okay, so here, this is another cheat sheet. It has a decision making, and we have a loop syntax as well. So if you want to take a look on more detail on the rank functions, so you can see it from here. You can provide only one syntax. It will generate list of number for you starting from 0 to 9. And if you provide two parameters, that means one here, the first parameter here representing as the starting numbers, and the last one is the ending number, which is not included. So it means if you say rank from 1 to 11, you will get the numbers from 1 to 10. But if you provide 3 parameters, the third one will represent the increments value. So each time it starts from 10. It starts from 10 here, and it will stop at 0. So each time you will get 10, and then you minus 1, you got 9. So from here you will get 10, 9, 8, 7 until 0, but 0 is not included, right? Okay, we get 1. Okay, next. So these are some more information on Python's quick overview. I think you can take a look on it, and these are some important parts. It will allow you to make writing code more advanced when you're trying to use some libraries available in Python. It allows you to do some data analysis, scientific computing, some other machine learning technique as well. And these are libraries that are already included in Python. You can just simply install it, and you can learn on how to use it. All right, and next we'll take a look on some practice exercise. So in the first exercise here, we try to write a program to compute factorial number, where the number here is input by the user, and make sure that we handle the error from the user as well. Suppose that the user inputs negative number, we cannot compute a factorial number, right? So in that case, we should detect it, and we made to display to the screen, asking the user to input the number again. And for exercise number 2, okay, you write a Python program to compute this suite of number, where n is an input obtaining from the user, and it should be a positive number. And in the third exercise, okay, you try to redo it, the exercise 2 again by using recursive function. I think you already have some basics programming language. You may know what is a recursive functions. So just a quick overview. It is a function that calls itself, right? Okay, next we will take a look on the practice exercise 1, and in here we will take on a solution. So as the instruction in the exercise 1, we're trying to get a number, then we will compute the factorial of that number, right? But we also try to validate whether the input is positive or negative, right? If it is negative, we will display some message and keep asking the user for another number. So actually the core here is we're trying to calculate factorial, right? So this is the part on how we create a factorial number. We will suppose from 1. So each time you're trying to loop some number from 1 to the numbers that equal to the input number, right? So in here you can use this syntax. We use n plus 1 because the last number generating from this rank function will be n, right? So from here, you may get 1, 2, 3 until n. So in here, you can use these operation in order that you can compute these factorial numbers. But before this, we need to write something in order to evaluate the input number, right? So, okay, we use while loop. We suppose that n is equal to -1. So the condition is we will stop the loop when the user input a positive number. Otherwise, we will keep asking the user for a positive number again. So we get an input number, and next we check if this number is negative. Okay, we display a message, invalid input. Otherwise, we will compute the factor, and then we will stop the program because n is positive. So if we take a look on the output here, suppose that I input a positive, we have a message, enter a positive number. But what happens if the user input a negative number? Okay, we input -5. So what it does, this is a negative number, right? Okay, we display this invalid input, and next we keep asking again. So if user still keep input negative number, it repeat the same code. But if the user input positive number, okay, we get into this point, right? So now it is positive number, we calculate this one, and finally we'll display this information. And when it comes to loops, now n is positive, so it will quit the program. Alright, I already explained the whole process. I hope you understand more on how the Python syntax works. And for the practice exercise number 2 and number 3, you can focus and practice on it later at home. So in next part, we come to the next part, which is quite more advanced in Python, which it is Python modules. How we can use modules in Python. So to begin with, let's take a look on definition of module. What is a Python module? It is just simply a library that somebody wrote it, and there are many available functions that you can use. So the purpose here, you include a library, and next you're trying to use some certain functions in order to perform some tasks for you. So this function is already defined. So the module here can be defined by other persons or yourself, like you want to define some function yourself so that you can make it into a module. So how we can use a module? We can just simply import it first. How to import it? We can use the import keyword, and we follow by the module names. And when we want to use it, we need to use the dot operation. So be sure that you import a library that you already install it. If you import some certain uninstalled libraries, you will get an error message. So now we'll take a look on examples of using import keyword. For example, we have import datetime and import OS. So these two libraries, datetime and OS, they are called standard library imports because they are already built in. I mean, when you install a Python, these two libraries will come for you. Whenever you can install, you can run it without any other installation. And another part, we can have third-party imports, in which you try to install those library first, and then you can use it. So in here, we use a module called Flask, which allows us to work with web development. So the syntax in using imports, we will take a look further in the next slide as well. Like in here, we use import first, and this one we can use from first, right? So these are two different ways. And there's another type of local library import in which you create yourself. So we call it local. So we need to provide some certain information. So next, this example gives you an example of how we can use match and random libraries. So you simply import it using the import keyword. And next, how to use it. Okay, you know the name of the function random here, right? So in order that you can use the function, for example, we have random integer number. So you need to pass the library name, and you use dot operator, and then the function name, right? So whatever parameter it needs, you just provide it. So it will execute for you. Another one, we have math. So in math, it has the constant called pi. So it will display those variables for you as well. Okay, next, we will take a look on the import here. There are two types that we can use. We call it relative import and absolute import. So as you familiar with the term relative, that means it relates to your current location, right? So in here, there are some symbols. You use a dot, single dot. You have 3 dots and you have 2 dots. So what does each symbol actually means? So if you use single dot, okay, you refer to a package which is in the same directory as your current location file. And in 2 dots, and you can import it because it is in the parent directory of your current location, right? But if you use 3 dots, it means current parent directory respectively. So from this, you can just relatively use your package, your module. Another way here, I think we have just used it. We have absolute import, because whenever we install the libraries, whether it is third parties or already come along with Python. If you place those library in certain paths that Python's program, it can run it. So from here, we have from package 1, we import a module. From package 1.module 2, we import a function. So this is just the way of how we can represent the syntax. So when you refer to in term here, you see package and module and function, right? So package here is just simply a folder. So in package here, this is a folder, and in the folder you have the module. So in module here, it will represent as a Python file. Suppose you have module 1 and you have module 2, and when you have function, this function is normally written in your module. So in each module we have different functions. So that's why sometimes we just only import some functions. Sometimes we want to import the whole modules. So this is just the way you can use it differently. And next we take a look in further details on how we can use the import keywords to import the library or module. And here we can simply import modules. You have import followed by module name. And if you want to import many modules at the same time, you can do it, just separate those module names by a comma. And there's another syntax which is similar to the first syntax here. We can use from module name here, we import star. So in here, it's work almost the same, but there's a little difference. As you can see from here, we have used it in random before. Whenever we try to call a function in this module, we need to give a module name. We have module name and then dots, function name, right? But in this syntax, if we use this one, we don't need to give the module name anymore. If you want to use some certain functions from this module, just give this name. No need to put like module dot that function name, no need at all, because we import all of them to the codes already. And if we want to import some specific information, some specific function from the module, we can just simply give it a direct. We use this one, module 1 dot function name. Which function you want to import? Okay, this one, which function you want to import? This is just similar. And if you want to import some several functions, okay, you can separate it by a comma. And there is one important syntax that we can use when we import a library. We import a module. We can alias the name. Sometimes you see that the module name is quite long, right? So you just simply use some syntax like import module 1 as M1. So in here, you rename this module as M1. So each time you're trying to call a function in this module, just says M1 dot function name. That's it. So it makes the way you write the code shorter. So next we take a look on examples of how we use NLTK in library. As we have mentioned in the previous lectures, we will use NLTKs to perform some NLP tasks in this course. So suppose that you already installed an LTK library. So now you can import it so that you can use some certain function. So from here, suppose that we have a text, a sentence, and go to school. And next, we use some process in text preprocessing. We will learn about this in the next chapter. So it will help you to tokenize some input here. So the purpose in word tokenize, will token the words in a given sentence for you. And we have some other function. We have post tags, which give you touchings in the word, in the list of words, whether this one is noun, is verb, adjective, or some other things. It represents a part of speech for you. We will take a further detail in this in next chapters. All right. So next we just take a look in example of the directory structure. Suppose we have a project structure, and you try to create some package you want to create some module. So you place that module into a package. Let's say you have package 1, you have package 2. They are represented as directories. And next you have some modules. Module 1, you have module 2. And these package 3, you have this information. So in package 3, you also have another sub package. And in that sub package, you have another module. So from this, if you already define the structures of the directory of where we put the module in the directory, in which package. So assume that we have some of this information. So how we can use it? So simply use it. For example, you want to import module 1 because module 1 is currently placed in the package 1. So from package 1, you import this module. Okay. And if you want to use some, for example, function 1, we suppose it is inside module 2 in the package 1. We can simply package first. We go through package first. So in this package, and we jump to module 2. So in module 2, it has function, right? So simply use these commands. And this table gives you a short summary on how you can use some function in NLP. Suppose that you already install library and then you import in LTK. So if you want to use some certain function, you can type the library name here. You use some function, so you follow it by a dot and you give the function name. So make sure that you give some appropriate parameters. For example, invert tokenize, you should provide some types, for example, given sentence or a text as well. So what it does, it will help you to token words. It will split word by word for you. So the parameter here, okay, you can give a text sentence. And what is the output from here? You will obtain the list of words from this sentence. And in post text, it will generate part of speech texting for you. But we have many other functions that we can use so that we can perform NLP tasks more faster. Alright, so now we come to the end of the chapter here. So these are references. Perhaps you can take a look in for more reference, for more documents. You can take a look on this information. And last but not least, we have some homeworks, and I hope you will do it. So we have 2 exercise here, and we have another 2 exercise here, which allow you to practice on some basic information, basic syntax in Python. And the last exercise, we will work on how we can work in files, because most of the time in LP tasks, you will try to read information from file, right? So it's a good start that you can start from practicing, reading, writing information, adding some more information to the file. So if you have any question on this homework, you can directly contact me anytime convenient. Okay, thank you for your attention. Hope to see you in the next chapters. Thank you.